Good morning, everyone. Just waiting for a bit for all the participants to successfully join the webinar, and then we'll start. All right. Good morning. On behalf of Democracy Reporting International, welcome to our webinar on the Czech parliamentary elections and the rule of law. My name is Jakub Jaraczewski. I'm the research coordinator at DRI, and I will be your host for this webinar. This webinar was organized as part of the Reconstitution program on the rule of law in the European Union, conducted by Democracy Reporting International and Forum Transregionale Studien with support from Stiftung Mercator. Joining me today are our fantastic guests, Andrea Procházková, journalist and legal expert at Týdeník Respekt, and David Ondráčka, member of the Global Board of Directors of Transparency International. Andrea, David, thank you very much for joining us today. First of all, a couple of small technical matters. We will be taking questions from audience, so feel free to use the Q&A function to convey your questions over to us, and we will pick hopefully as many of them as we are able to within an hour and answer them. And also towards the end of the webinar, we will share a link to a survey, and we will be delighted if you could fill out the survey and let us know how you found this event. So without much further ado, let me begin with framing the topic for today's discussion. So with the rule of law crisis in countries such as Hungary and Poland, especially with yesterday's escalation of the situation in Poland, and with Slovakia facing its own challenges when it comes to the rule of law, we're not hearing much about the Czech Republic and the situation there when it comes to the rule of law. And the country has so far been frequently seen as the good one on the rule of law among the Visegrad Four. And with the parliamentary elections kicking off today, there's the question of what is the situation with the rule of law there? What are the issues and why do they matter? And I'll turn first to Andrea to tell us a little bit about the rule of law situation in the country.
Good morning, everyone, again. I quite agree that we are maybe overshadowed by Hungary or Poland or their situation, because we are not at that bad shape as they are. But you know, international organizations highlighted time to time that we have our specific problems which could develop in the future. So I was thinking about this question, and I think that I would divide like two categories problems in the Czech Republic with rule of law. The first category is issues connected to the current Prime Minister Andrej Babiš. I'm sure that we will discuss it further, but just for basic summary, he's being criminally prosecuted by the Czech police for potential EU subsidy fraud in a case known as the Stork Nest affair. It's a case over the alleged misuse of EU funds. And also European Commission auditors also found him to be in conflict of interest due to his role as Czech head of government. And while he at the same time controlling Agrofair, the business empire he founded through trust fund. So this is like problems connected to one person in the state. And then I have some more general issues, which I think I just out loud now, and we could discuss it in the next minutes. The first thing is that we don't have like really good regulation preventing political influence of on function of the state administration. So it's really easily influenced by current political forces, and it's not current, but it's not only connected to the current administration, but it's just a matter of fact for long history of the Czech Republic. And then I think that we are also solving question of independence of judges and prosecutors. For example, there are no rules regulating some informal pressure from politics or people around them, and moreover, more basic point, but the Czech politicians, I think that the Czech politicians do not understand law system very well, and some basic principles when we are speaking about justice issues. So that's why some of them are too scared to do any reform, or others propose solutions which are in contradiction with independence or other principles. So that's also a problem, because when you don't have like capable politicians who understand law, it's hard to make changes, and it's hard to make good changes. So this is for me at the beginning, just some outlying points.
Thank you, Andrea. David, what would be your take?
Good morning, and thanks for having me. We have elections today and tomorrow, and let me jump directly on what is it about, basically. I guess we faced 8 years ago hostile takeover of this country, right? Second richest guy in the country actually made it to politics, and he uses his billions to actually buy influence and created such a machinery that actually since then very much fascinates everyone as in the public. It completely disbalanced political game, because on one hand you have enormous money, influence, and means, and on the other hand it creates enormous pressure since then on institutions, on rules of the game, on let's say some kind of pillars of public integrity, so to say, and also it completely fascinates the public debate and distracts it from any other issue and any other topic that needs to be discussed. So, you know, Babiš is an issue, and a topic of election, in my view, is whether we get rid of this barbarian or not, just to put it very, very bluntly. And one more thing at the start, like we always discuss issues like rule of law and democracy in comparison with our neighbors. So what is the difference from Babiš from Kaczynski or Orban, let's say, all right? I believe these guys, they have some similar traits, but as well, they are quite different. In my view, Kaczynski and Orban are politicians in a standard way. They are very ideological. They have their own means and goals that they want to achieve. Babiš is a business guy who wants to conquer anything that he touches. He sees public budget as his own ATM, where he can come anytime and then basically take the money. He understands the thing simply in a very acquisition-like mode. When he used to be a business guy only, so he was buying other companies. So he was very aggressive, in acquisitions. And that's how he understands politics as well. So his kind of mentality is either you are enemy or you are his slave. There are no other options, right? There are no friends. So I believe this is really what matters in these elections. But obviously, we have a lot of issues related to rule of law, and it's not caused by one guy only. It just means that if you want to discuss them and uncover any kind of way to solutions, you need first to get rid of this bottleneck at the head. Otherwise, we will be stuck. And one last thing, at the start, well, what is very common to those authoritarians these days in our part of the world is that they learn from each other, right? They take lessons and they admire each other. So, you know, Babiš admires Orban and Viktor is his best friend now because like he admires what he achieved in Hungary. You know, he wins elections, he destroyed the rule of law, he kicked off universities and journalists. And at the same time, EU is still paying the bill. That's fascinating, right? That they would love to achieve all that. But I believe we have to do everything possible to actually prevent that. And in Czech case, today's elections is just about that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, both of you, for setting the tone and also highlighting how the Czech situation is both similar and different from the one in the neighborhood countries. And I would like now to turn to one more detailed issue, which we are looking into with a lot of worry, what's happening with Poland, with courts, and with the government exerting more and more control over the judiciary. I was curious, how do you see the situation of independence of judiciary, independence of prosecutors in Czechia? And is the situation there in any way comparable to what we've seen in Poland and Hungary?
No, I don't think so. I think that there is no comparison to Poland and Hungary, especially not in the Czech Republic. I think that the situation in the Czech Republic is quite good. It's not ideal. I think that we could do more and better, but I think there is no systematic issues connected to the judicial and prosecutor independence. We have some specific problems connected to individuals. For example, the Prosecutor General of the Czech Republic, Pavel Zeman, left his office, I think, in early in June, and he claimed that the main reason was the political pressure on his work provided by the Ministry of Justice. But on the other hand, the next person in this office is quite a good choice. It's not ideal, but it's like, I think, independent prosecutor who could go on of the work of Pavel Zeman. Also, the second affair was connected to the president of the Czech Republic. His secretary was trying to influence the decisions of judges which were connected to the Czech president or his interest. It was informal pressure. For example, the secretary wrote a letter to one of the head of the highest administrative court or tried to persuade specific judges to decide in a particular way. But these things, I think, it more reflects like individual cases or breaches, not like the system as whole. Because I am writing about judicial and prosecutor independence a lot, and I think that they are a lot of strong individuals in the system, and especially in the head of courts and prosecutions. So that's why I am quite optimistic about this. But we have some problems, especially that our politicians, for example, weren't capable to pass law which would limit the time of the high prosecutors' offices, and that's why every attempt to remove any prosecutor, especially when he or she is investigating something with connection to the politics, raises a question about independence of justice. So that's the main problem for me, that we need some laws, but there are no will or maybe some compromise in the political sphere.
If I may just quickly comment, I would agree that it's not comparable to Polish or Hungarian stage. Especially judges, they keep their independence. Of course, there are some bad apples from time to time, and there are cases that actually raise our eyebrows. But I think generally it's not overtaken by current establishment, and we probably cannot expect anything like happened to Poland yesterday, that there would be questioned primacy of EU legislation and stuff like that at the constitutional level. The slightly different issue is with prosecutors. It's more complex, and it's not a black and white issue. There is always debate whether prosecutors actually are part of the executive power, or maybe there is no such a debate constitutionally, but in fact, factually there is, and whether especially when we discuss politically exposed persons being involved in some criminal cases, it's always super sensitive, and we all know that on one hand we would expect quick fixes and some quick results. On the other hand, these are very complicated cases that takes years. But my view, in recent couple of years, the prosecution of super sensitive political issues got stalled a bit, and that's what I see as a problem. And it's not, of course, we cannot over criminalize politics. That's definitely true. But at the same time, there might not be impunity for some and prosecution for others. So I think this is the thing. But in comparison to Poland or Hungary, I believe we are still relatively okay. Risks are there, but I believe it's pretty stable, and still judiciary makes some kind of buffer to any crazy ideas that comes out of executive powers or parliamentarians or stuff like this.
Thank you very much. And then, setting against this backdrop, I would like to move to the question regarding the fight against corruption. It's immediately seen that it's a topic that's high on the agenda. It's on the political manifestos of most parties standing for this election. But how does the fight against corruption look like? What is the efficiency of the actions that are being taken oversight, and how's the battle against the undue influence of big money shaping up in the country?
David, I think it's a question more for you, and I will add something.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Andrea. Well, everything is beautiful and shiny, you know. No, I'm kidding. It's, of course, it's a struggle. If and I was in that business, so to say, for 15 years and very intimately, and fighting for some accountability mechanisms, so to involve some checks and balances into legislation and also institutions. And I mean, it's not a one-way street, right? So on one hand, you have to be always balancing different interests, and at the same time, create some rules, but also make sure that these rules make sense, they are appropriate, and at the same time, they might be efficiently enforced in reality. So what I think is, generally, we have rules in place. We're struggling with the fact that some of the key enforcement institutions were overtaken by either politically nominated guys, which is always the part of the game, but also highly incompetent guys who simply are not up to the task, and then the whole institution struggles, right? So you can see it on different areas. Well, and what I believe is that we have to make sure that also enforcement institutions have enough capacities, right? I mean, like, well, I was closely involved in certain investigations, so I know that sometimes police guys are simply lacking staff to actually do some investigations. And if you think of corruption today, international money laundering, shell companies, you need to have a lot of exchanges with international environment. You need to really follow the money, and it's not easy as it used to be before. And it's simply, you need to have staff, and sometimes that's the ideal way how you make it inefficient. That simply you cut the budget. And last comment, well, in some way, I believe that the Czech environment is dominated by a group of really influential people and their groups. You might call it oligarchs, but okay, then they don't like this term, of course. And they, to some extent, control large and important parts of business and economy. At the same time, of course, they buy media. We will get to that shortly. But what I'm trying to say is that they, in my view, keep some kind of silent agreements and deals that we are not attacking each other, which actually means that there is some kind of a cartel among them. That's how I see it, And I know it's a rather tough comment, but I believe that's what actually affects the situation. And consequently, they actually believe that Babiš is actually not bad option for them, as long as he, provides safe and open environment for their business. They can make individual agreements with him, and he's one of them. So I believe that's what dominates the political game. So we are not talking about corruption in a small traditional sense. We're talking about undue influence, links between oligarchs and politics, and really something which actually legitimizes the rules of the game. So you distort the rules of the game, and then it affects your business for a decade to come. That's how this lobbying is being done, and that's what matters.
Thank you very much, David. And you've touched upon something that I also wanted to address today, which is the situation of media. Free media are critical for the rule of law in many ways, both in the ways that they report on what's happening in the country and they report on breaches of the rule of law, but also one of the key elements of a well-functioning state is a situation where the media are free from undue influence from the government or other actors and are being protected against this influence. And I was wondering, what is the situation of the Czech media in the context of the rule of law and those developments that both of you already spoke about? Perhaps, Andrea, you could share any insight with us.
Yes, it's really hard, difficult topic to talk about because, Respekt or other newspapers belong to the media house called Ekonomia, which I'm part of. I could say that we are free to write about rule of law issues, but in the newspapers which are part of Prime Minister Trust Fund, it's a different situation. It's hard to tell more information about the state of freedom or unfreedom there. We see what some of these journalists, not all, but some of them write, or how they, for example, interview Prime Minister. And from my point of view, it doesn't seem as the most critical approach. Sometimes there are a lot of information which we as other journalists don't know about, but these newspapers have access to it. So that's some some information which could work with. But I don't have any evidence inside from inside these newsrooms, which I could use and say, yes, in these newspapers, journalists are not free to report about whatever they want, including rule of law issues. So, but on the other hand, these newspapers, and especially Mladá fronta Dnes or Právo, these two biggest newspapers maybe, has had headlines which copy the words of Prime Minister on his ministers during election campaign, or reproduce their messages every day. So that's a big problem, because the media discourse is then transform and do not reflect the reality. And I think it's also more difficult for other politicians to get out their message. So that's one thing which we heard from other politicians, that the media discourse and the campaign is disbalanced, because our current Prime Minister owns 1/3 of Czech media, so it's really big part of the market. From my point of view, I don't feel political pressure, but there are some obstacles or difficulties which are connected to the fact that, for example, the Prime Minister, but not only him, for example, Tomio Okamura, which is far-right extremist, I could say, and his party, or the president of the Czech Republic, don't speak with us. So at all, we couldn't ask questions. We don't have any information about, for example, current health situation of the Czech president, and these things are quite problematic for our work. So that's my point when we are talking about rule of law issue, and maybe political influence, or some obstacles which we have to face it nowadays. And also the public media, but I think it could David talk more about. But the last majority in parliament, it's not like the government, but the majority in parliament packed the supervisory board of the Czech television, which is public television, but also the Czech radio. And these boards are essential because they could fire the director general, who has the main influence on form and content of broadcasting, and that's his problem. We have a historic example from, I don't know, 2001 or 2002, so-called television crisis, when some high-profile politicians try to seize control over the Czech television. Fortunately, it was unsuccessful because people went to the streets and demonstrating, but that was the aim and maybe homework of this last majority in parliament, to just have more influence on public television and radio, because it's one of the most popular in the country.
If I may add just 2 points. One, Andrea touched, that's the public broadcasters, television and radio. You know, there's the debate whether it is actually public broadcaster or it should be like state broadcaster, right? Which reflects the views of current governing entity or establishment. And these pressures are there through those supervisory boards and it's always present. But the other comment I wanted to make on the private media was that basically when I touched this oligarchization, so it also was visible here. So basically local financial groups over last decade took over almost all media houses and televisions, radios, printed media and online servers. And it doesn't mean that they wouldn't report on the news and on stories, but like you always have to ask questions, cui bono, right? What it actually helps, why this story is mentioned now, why this way, what was actually omitted from the story. So in my view, when you look at it from the distance, they actually keep each other in check, and to some extent they use it as a weapon against each other. One of them put it very clearly when he bought a newspaper. He said, "It's my nuclear weapon," right? When I buy the newspaper, I can use it, and I don't plan to, but if needed, I will. So that's the way of understanding the media as a weapon against your competitor.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to move to another topic, which is also an elephant in the room, and that's the COVID-19 pandemic and the legal reaction to this. One thing that we identified in our research last year, and it was also highlighted in the European Commission's Rule of Law report for Czech Republic, was the use of emergency legislation and emergency measures to handle the COVID-19 pandemic and the issues regarding the legality of this, and also the ever-present danger of those emergency measures creeping into the normal legal state and forming something of a long-lasting emergency that goes well beyond the actual danger. Is there anything that you could comment on that, and is this being discussed, and is being a major issue in the current debate in Czechia?
So yeah, I think that it's still with us, this problem, because the representation, political representation is the same. There were two kinds of problems. First of all, called emergency state. It's like exceptional part of legislative process in which government could pass easier the legislation and also restrict some freedoms of citizens. This emergency state was once declared in conflict with constitution, because when the government wants to prolong it, they should have yes from the whole parliament, but the parliament didn't want to give this yes to the government because they don't present reason for prolonging it, and it was seen as bianco check. So that's why they don't agree with it. So the government went to the president of each region, and they just prolong it instead of parliament. And a lot of constitutional lawyers said that it was so unconstitutional that it's unacceptable. And the second, and I think bigger problem and current one, is that the Czech Ministry of Health and government repeatedly pass has passed law actions which are unlawful, and our courts has had to cancel them because of the breach of the competence of Minister of Health, or of because of the lack of justification by the ministry wants to restrict these specific freedoms of citizens. And this problem is still with us, and it also creates a big tension between Kurds and politicians, because politicians are saying nowadays that, you know, judges are fighting against us, which we want to just prevent your health from COVID disease, and these judges, like, you know, are focusing on rule of law, what it is, and that's the tension, and I think that it will stay in judicial departments for a long time, because there were also a big frustration connected to these cases, and the problem is that we don't know if these problems are caused by incompetence of state administration, that they couldn't write a good law, or it was caused on purpose. Some cases couldn't be decided by courts because they are not justified, and in this kind of situation, the court has to say, we couldn't decide the merit of the case, whether this law is lawful or not. But you as a government should firstly give better explanation when you pass this law. And that's the problem, because you know, we don't know if these law actions are according to the pandemic law, or are just, you know, some basic rules without explanation and justification. And it's a problem in the state who is declared as rule of law state. So
very quickly, like to be really fair, this pandemic was unprecedented, right, for everyone, and it was a crisis that actually took us off guard everywhere in the world. Obviously, it tested dramatically the quality of institutions and their quick and rapid reactions to situations that was changing every day. And we saw a lot of failures, you know, during that process, right? During acquisitions of emergency stuff and medical equipment, the procurement was very chaotic, and most probably it was to some extent the free lunch for certain companies and providers who made enormous money on these deals, which are like emergency deals, right? Which were done using, you know, exceptions and procurement exceptions. The other aspect Andrea mentioned was the different bans and rules of lockdowns, which actually were not explained enough in those provisions, and then administrative courts are canceling some of them, which adds to this insecurity and also to certain skepticism that how come that government is not able to provide something which is actually legal and lawful, and actually it adds to that anti-COVID wave as well, because like that fuels the thing. Well, my view, my lesson would be that simply we need to get ready for any kind of emergency crisis much better. We need to build stronger institutions, because like, for instance, I guess everyone knew in this country that our Ministry of Health is just an empty house, basically. You know, they putting bluntly, but like there are not enough experts inside, and it's that might be a problem. But in fine times, it didn't matter that much. But now the crisis came, and all of a sudden they had to be action-oriented, and they had to they work, and it actually failed. So that's a typical example why you need to build sound institutions and provide them with enough capacity, rules, and then some kind of internal security. So that's the lesson from COVID. I hope that if any next wave comes, we will be better prepared, and I hope this bloody period will be over soon.
Thank you very much, both of you. And yes, I share the hope that this will be soon behind us in one way or another. One quick reminder for all the attendees, feel free to ask questions in the chat or the Q&A function, and we will be taking them at the end of the webinar. And now I would like to move into the elections and the election campaigns and the possible outcomes. And I would start with the question, did the rule of law, did those issues that we've talked about today, have they featured in a major way on the election campaign trail? Were there any particular parties that would keep the rule of law high on their agenda or would highlight special issues? Or did these issues not feature to a great extent, and was the campaign focused more on other areas?
So let me start this time now. Well, first, for context of people who are watching it abroad, like, what's our political scene now, right? So we have Babiš and his business party. Then we have two opposition coalitions that actually, one is, let's say, more conservative form of former ODS party, who was basically in charge of the country for 25 years. And then you have a more liberal coalition dominated by Pirate Party, which is quite unique in European context because, like, it's not seen elsewhere. Then you have a ultra-nationalist party run by Japanese guy and fighting against migration. And then on left side of the political spectrum, there are socialists and communists who are struggling that they won't cross the 5% threshold. And as a newcomer to the political game is a special party made of ex-police officers who form their own political force, which is called the Oath, and they seek revenge. That's how I understand their motivation, because they were kicked out of police forces. Well, and said that's the political scene. We have more or less German system that you have a proportional elections, you need to cross 5% threshold, and then you form coalitions. So very important is who crosses those, who makes it to the parliament, and sometimes smaller or junior partners can be decisive who will be actually in charge. Well, so that's the scene. And to your question, whether rule of law was present, it was present in my view, although it was not a dominant issue, right? Generally, it doesn't drive people mad whether you discuss independence of judiciary. It's not something that really matters in elections to that extent. It was present in a way of course, Babiš issue and his milking of the funds and criminal investigations. And in last week of the campaign, we had these Pandora Papers, which actually took very last minute of the thing, him, suspicious of money laundering of Babiš in France, which is huge. I think we can touch it later. But I believe main issues were economic, social, to some extent pandemic or post-pandemic. And of course, all those parties try to, on one hand, scare voters or somehow attract them to actually discuss some future prospects of the country. Well, all in all, and I finish, it's almost impossible to estimate results tomorrow because, like, there are so many undecided voters, perhaps more than ever, and it will be very tight. And at the same time, the results itself don't decide the game. It will be post-elections negotiations that might take long months. That will actually be who will be able to form the government. And in Czech case, that's another specific feature, and that's the role of president, who, he has relatively open hands in terms of who will be nominated to form a government. And the current Czech president, Mr. Zeman, he's out of any boundary, so he doesn't have any constraints anymore. We don't even know whether he's alive now, honestly, right? In bad health situation, but he can do whatever whatever he wants, and that makes the situations super unclear, and it will be fun to watch it after elections.
Yeah. I agree with David that rule of law is not the main issue or main topic in this campaign, but it was really interesting to see how the two pre-election opposition blocs reacted to the fact that the case called Stork Nest Affairs connected to the Andrej Babiš was reopened during the election campaign. So I think that it was the highlight of the campaign and the rule of law issues. But on the other hand, I think that we could say that the main topic of this campaign is justice, or one of the main of topic in this campaign is justice, and justice. So it works in the Czech Republic, because nowadays it's the main topic of the oath, ex-policeman party or movement. It worked for Andrej Babiš in 2013, and it worked earlier in the Czech politics. So there is some complex of the Czech society when we heard topic justice. It could possibly end as a party in the parliament. So that's I would say that it's maybe for the Czech citizens who are not lawyers or experts, the same as rule of law issues. And I also agree that this election is not about the winner. It's about the majority in the parliament, and it's referendum. It is referendum about Andrej Babiš after his 4 years in the office, and that's why there are a lot of discussion about conflict of interest from the two pre-election opposition blocs, and it will be really really interesting to see tomorrow's results, because I don't know if anyone in this country could predict what will happen, because and also what will happen after the election, because yes movement has to find its coalition partner, and I think it will not be an easy choice, and it depends on number of parties which will be really unpredictable, and maybe have some demands which will be not in the best interest of Andrej Babiš and his foreign politics and his foreign persona, and it could change this maybe the direction of foreign policy, because in the game is now the far right extremists who want to Czechs, and they are very anti-European, and there are also Communist Party who could be in the parliament, and so it will be really interesting to follow it.
Thank you very much. Pirates and revenge-seeking police officers, never a dull moment in Czech politics. I would like to, speaking of moments, to take one question from the audience and go back 2 years to the 2019 protest, the massive protest that erupted in Czech Republic. And I would like to ask, do you think that those protests changed something in the sense of the public being more sensitive, interested in the rule of law and corruption issues, and have those protests have any lasting impact on state institutions? Then do you see them as being some kind of a turning point in the public debate in the country?
I think that the one thing which caused these big protests in Prague is that these two coalition blocs were formed. I think that without this demonstration, it wouldn't happen. I am quite sure about it, because it was real. These protesters are the main political supporters of these two blocs or 5 parties. So they knew that they have to do it to raise some voices against Andrej Babiš. So that's my take from it. But I don't know if these demonstrations changed or could change a debate about rule of law. I think that they just highlighted some affairs or some affairs or cases at the moment, but nowadays it's more about the political political result and to pre-election coalition bloc, the opposition bloc.
If I may, well, these events and public rallies, they were like huge, and I think, you know, it made impact. You know, I was part of it because like I was speaking at some of those demonstrations, and it resulted from the fact that, you know, when I was heading TI, so it was me who initiated those complaints against Babiš at the European Union, and also local authorities against conflict of interest and milking of the funds and subsidies. But if you think of it, then of course it was like huge protest movement which erupted at some point, and then it failed and somehow got silent. Partly because people cannot protest forever. That's one thing. But the second thing is, of course, COVID arrived and it, you know, stopped any public meetings and rallies, and you lost, you know, or this movement actually lost this raison d'etre to when you actually go out and protest. And of course, part of it is also this political answer, which, you know, resulted in forming two opposition blocs that can beat Babiš now, if they manage, who knows. But you know, it seems to me that this public event, the public eruption, it's unlikely to repeat itself shortly. If the election results end up in some kind of draw, which I expect, which will be kind of 50-50, although it's questionable, then I guess it will leave the whole society in apathy, and there won't be much of the protest. Of course, there might be different scenarios. So the opposition groups win; they will have a majority, but still they will not get to the government quickly because of president stuff. That might actually bring people to protest again, but I expect rather some kind of very apathic and rather unstable political situation afterwards. It might take us perhaps long months before we are able to form any kind of majority government, and that's scary because, like, you know, we discuss rule of law here, but at the same time, the train is leaving, right? And the whole world is moving, and we kind of seem to get stuck on issues, and we are not discussing much of the how to modernize the economy, how to improve our social services, how to make country really ready for the future, and it's not enough. And that's last sentence. It's not enough for us to say, well, look at Poles and Hungarians. They are even in bigger shit than we are at the moment. You know, that's not enough, I believe. We should be Denmark of Europe, because, like, we have capacity for that, and we are stuck in the middle of nowhere. That's how I see it.
Thank you very much, both of you. David, you spoke about the results and the outcomes, and it brings me to another question which we have from the audience. And this question speaks to a broader issue of how will people like Kaczyński, Orban, or Babiš react to a result of an election that would be unfavorable for them. And my question to you would be, what do you expect Babiš's reaction to the election results would be if he were to lose? Is there any danger of actions similar to which Donald Trump was initiating with request for recounts and for kind of subverting the legality of the vote? Do you see anything of any such danger possible?
Well, you know, Babiš's got a lot to lose, right? He might face a jail time, and he might also lose his business if the budget and subsidy taps are being closed. Well, if he loses tomorrow, I don't expect recounts or some kind of a questioning of the process of elections, because it seems traditionally done in a rather professional thing. There are, of course, some issues, but still it is okay. what I expected, he will do everything to actually not to lose some kind of impunity that he possesses today. I mean, criminal impunity primarily, and also tax impunity, I would say. So he's a transaction man. He's a business guy, so he can, you know, bribe anyone around, you know, if necessary. And so he will do everything possible to prolong the process, to, you know, to test anyone who would be able to let himself or herself be bought. But like, and even if he fails and he ends up in opposition or he quits politics, he will definitely, you know, we cannot expect quick fixes in terms of criminal investigations or any other stuff. It will take years. He's got, you know, he's paying expensive lawyers to really defend him professionally, and even stopping of his subsidies, which in my view are illegal and unlawful at the moment. It would probably require long litigations of Czech state against his companies, and it would take years. So, I mean, he's a bottleneck that we need to get rid of. That's how I see it. And it can actually allow us to return to normal politics. And I believe this is a kind of a experiment in our post-communist history that needs to end. But last thing, I guess he seems to be unbeatable at the moment, right? Huge empire, money, you know, machinery, marketing, but it's also rather fragile. So I think it's all built on one person, on individual capacities, and whether and at the moment he loses the direct power grip, I think it may all collapse, and it may actually we might see that this whole empire is over. So I don't expect any kind of recounts or questioning of process, but I expect doing everything possible to make it long and somehow find a way out of it.
Yeah, I would add one thing. I think that we live in different political system than it is in the US, and also it's a parliamentary election, not presidential one. And I think it's not good looking strategy to ask for recount because it's proportional system and it's about majority. So for me, I think that the most good strategy for Andrej Babiš is that he will seek this majority, and not only in the parties as whole, but also maybe some political deservers from other parties. It's kind of effective strategy. So it will be only about the majority in parliament, and that's why I think it's easier for Andrej Babiš to try to persuade other politicians. And also we also know that the first attempt, as President said, it will be in the hands of the Prime Minister no matter what. I don't think that it will change. So we will be talking. We are talking now more about the situation after the first attempt, when when the current Prime Minister doesn't have trust in the Parliament. So yeah.
Thank you very much. And just to remind everyone, we've shared the link to the survey in the chat. So we invite you to provide us with the feedback on how our webinars are going. We're getting close to the end of our time. So I will wrap it up with a question regarding something that I briefly mentioned at the very beginning, which is the Visegrad Four and the situation there. So Visegrad Four, which has attained its objectives of joining NATO and joining the European Union, is increasingly seen as kind of diverging, with Poland and Hungary having the rule of law crisis, but also with other issues such as the Turów power plant case between Czech Republic and Poland. And my question would be to you, do you think that the results of the elections in the Czech Republic could influence the dynamic inside of the Visegrad Four and the relationship between the country and its allies especially on the topics such as rule of law, democracy, and human rights? Do you see something changing within V4 following the elections in Czech Republic, or will things continue as they are now?
Okay, sorry, Andrea, sorry. No, you know, it's a hard question. I mean, to some extent, it looks like at the moment it's rather like a group of authoritarians fascinated by each other who is actually supporting and exchanging ways how to milk the EU funds. That's how I see it to some extent. But it shouldn't be, right? And of course, like all our countries have so much in common, and we have a shared interest that we could actually do jointly very efficiently. So I still see a lot of points of and reasons to collaborate, but it seems to be very much distracted from that positive collaboration at the moment as a V4. We will see what's going to happen on EU level. Like the risk of any other exits is still there, and we are potentially candidates for that. And what happened in Poland now is what's happening there. It actually shows that each elections that we're going to face in our part of the world will be kind of decisive, right? It's like, do we stay as a part of EU? Do we stay as a part of the mainstream, or we want to divert from that? And in this regard, it might be that the V4 will no longer be as relevant. That's how I see it. It will be rather key thing whether in this particular country the elections will not bring such a result that will actually end up in any kind of exit from EU. And from my point of view, exits for our types of countries would be deadly.
Yeah, I think that there will be some influence on Visegrad group. You know, as we said, Andrej Babiš calls Viktor a friend. Viktor Orbán was a guest of the Czech Prime Minister during the election campaign. And while I think that the Czech Prime Minister don't want to copy the Hungarian model of governing in the Czech Republic, there are some evidence that he doesn't care so much about press freedom or rule of law. So these issues are not part of his mindset, and that's the problem. So if he will be a Czech prime minister for the next 4 years, it could mean that Andrej Babiš will be more allied with Orbán than with other European governments, and also, for example, than with with government in Slovakia. If we elect another prime minister, especially from the two opposition blocs, I think that the situation could be different, and even the opposite. But you know, we don't know how these politicians are in this function and will be, and what will be their direction. And I think also we should also, speaking of influence in Europe, the next Czech presidency in the Europe will take place in, I hope, in the second half of 2022. And it will be interesting how our government will look like. There is one possible coalition, as we mentioned, Yes movement of Andrej Babiš and SPD of Tomio Okamura, which is quite strong anti-Europe. And I couldn't imagine what it will be. What it will mean to have these government coalition at this time. So this situation will not seem as good for Czech reputation.
Thank you very much. We are unfortunately running close to the end of our allocated time, and I kind of regret it because this discussion has been fascinating. And Andrea, David, thank you very much for painting a picture of the situation in the Czech Republic, what is happening there with the rule of law, what's at stake in this election. And for all of you, I invite you to follow Democracy Reporting International on our coverage on the rule of law in the European Union as part of the Reconstitution program. And I hope to see you soon in another briefing on developments within the EU. Once again, many thanks to our esteemed guests, and I hope to see you all soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.